Hi, folks. Thank you for joining us here on Public Affairs. I am your host. My name is John Peterson. Today we are talking with the mayor of Marion, Mr. Scott Schertzer, talking about issues that are relevant to all of us here living in the Marion community. And so thank you. Let's welcome Mr. Schertzer for being here. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I know there's a lot of issues, but welcome and thank you.
Well, thank you. We always have a lot of issues to talk about on public affairs, but
Yes.
The viewers who typically watch us might notice that we're in a different setting right now. So
The setting has definitely changed. We're in a different place. I can definitely say it is an improvement, if you will, and so perhaps we can speak to the powers that be, and perhaps we can be here for a long time.
Well, that'd be great. There's plenty of arm room in here.
Yeah, plenty of arm room. Takes a little bit to get used to. But first of all, I know there's several things that we didn't talk about here, but I did want to let the viewers know that we are talking about issues that pertain directly to them, and that this may be one of the few places to be able to learn what actual truth, not actual truth, but inside baseball, so to speak, of how things work around the community. So to lead right in here to the first one, we're in the midst of a significant snow here, which suggests that snow and ice removal, as the city has to deal with that. What can you tell us about that subject?
Well, yeah, you're right. It's a good time to talk about snow and ice because we have about 4 to 6 inches of snow out there right now. I don't suspect that this snow is going to last very long. The temperature's supposed to rise this afternoon and even the next couple of days, so it should be gone. But here's a situation where we got some snow very early in the morning. I don't know if it started at 3 or 4 in the morning, and it came quick and it came fast all at one time. The nice thing is in the winter months, as we mentioned last month, is that we have a second and third shift on. So we actually had a small skeleton staff on at the time that this snow began. So they could get out on the streets right away and take really the pulse of how bad it was out there. And then they could determine whether they had to call in the crews earlier to get the snow plows out on the street. We can put up to 10 snow plows out on the city streets at one time. Now, these are not all big trucks that have a salt spreader on the back. We have about 5 or 6 of those, and then some smaller ones that are pickup trucks with plows and some salt spreaders for the more tighter areas in our community. But they were out early this morning. It's a very wet, slushy, heavy snow. So you have to be careful as how you push that snow off the streets. Believe it or not, the curvature of those snow blades, those snow plows, can launch that snow quite a distance.
Oh, yes.
We had a situation in the last snow event where it was launched onto a guy's front porch, and he was a little upset, but we went back and apologized, and I hope and I think that he appreciated that. So sometimes that happens when you get this heavy, wet snow, that those blades will launch it a lot further than you think. And also I noticed as I was driving around this morning, mostly in our residential areas, that oftentimes it blocks you in your driveway.
Oh, yes.
And that's unfortunate, I know, and the only thing that I can tell folks is, I'm sorry. We have to get it off of the city streets. That's our primary responsibility. And then you might have a little extra to shovel out at the end of your driveway. So please be careful of that. We have plenty of equipment. We have plenty of employees. We could always use more in a snow event. But I think by the end of the day, you're going to be able to get around anywhere in the city. Our thoroughfares are done first. They were cleared before we went to lunch today. And so then we'll get on our secondary streets and then into the residential neighborhoods, which is always last. We have had an ample supply of salt. So far this year, knock on wood, we haven't had any concerns about getting our salt supply in. Our superintendent of the street department is Scott Kurz. I've mentioned he came to us from the Ohio Department of Transportation, and so he knows exactly when to order that salt well in advance before our salt levels are depleted down, that we don't have enough to salt the streets. So things are looking good right now.
Very good. You mentioned something there that I would like to ask a question of, which has to do with municipal equipment. You mentioned you having a wide range of equipment. Is the equipment you have adequate for the future? Are you planning on replacing it, upgrading it, whatever?
Well, actually, we just took 3 ordinances to City Council just the other night to replace some of our aging equipment. We're actually using a piece of equipment from the early 1990s, believe it or not, and it's our big front-end loader. And because of the age of it and the condition of it, and it's gotten more than the useful life out of it, we're asking council to allow us to buy a new front-end loader. And these are these big front-end loaders.
Yes.
So we can use it for removal of snow. We can use it in construction projects. We have a wide variety of uses for this piece of equipment. We also went to them for a new snow plow and snow truck last night. We also have to replace those pieces of equipment every so often. So those 2 pieces of equipment have been budgeted for this year in the street department capital budget line item. So we were prepared to pay for them when the time came. And then the 3rd piece of equipment is a smaller trash compactor or a small packer. That's what we pick up your trash in. This is a single axle compared to the double axles that we use so often. And we use the smaller single axle packer in, again, tighter areas with cul-de-sacs and some of our narrow streets in our older neighborhoods. And we also planned for that as well and budgeted for it. And that will come out of the sanitation line item. So we have been prepared to go and ask council to get these 3 pieces of expensive equipment by budgeting for it and making sure that we had the money to pay for it when the time came. So it'll go to council next week for their final approval. Oftentimes what we recognize, believe it or not, with big pieces of equipment like this, it can take up to months before they build it and they get it delivered to us. Now, the one piece of equipment they have in stock right now, so we should get it sooner rather than later. But a couple of those pieces, it's going to take 4 to 6 months and sometimes even longer to get that equipment in. So we won't put those into service until late this year, early next year.
Something that has to be planned well ahead of time.
Yes.
We talked once before here recently about the need for replacement of or adding to the police force. Any new additions to the police force happening or planned for?
Well, actually, I just swore in a new police officer yesterday.
Wow.
And this is an additional officer to the force, so that gives us 1 extra police officer out on the street. The nice thing about this police officer is oftentimes when we hire a police officer, they have to go through a training period, and that can take months at a time to go through the training period. This is a police officer who worked for the city and then left the service of the city and then asked to come back when an opening became available. So we worked with council and the city auditor, Kelly Carr, and also the chief of police, Bill Collins, to make sure that we had enough money budgeted this year, because initially we didn't, but we were able to make an adjustment to the police department salary line item, and we were able to swear in this police officer yesterday, and he is on the streets today.
Wow.
That's never happens that quickly, and that's the quickest that we can do
So
something
it was a
like
pertinent
that.
time to ask that question.
It was a perfect storm, you might say.
Very good. So one thing that we talk about often is the jobs, which is to say municipal jobs that are available, as well as you knowing of other jobs that are available. What is the latest you can inform us of there?
Well, unfortunately, during the winter months, we don't have that many jobs available. I know in the past couple months, we had talked about a number of jobs that we had. And let me just say, what I'm hearing from the department heads that had job openings available, they had some great candidates. They said some of the best pool of candidates have applied for city jobs, and they have offered those jobs to some of those individuals.
Yeah.
So they're going to be working for us. This month, however, we are still in need of a maintenance electrician. And this is somebody that needs skill and background in working with electrical equipment. And so that is a unique skill that a lot of folks aren't going into that profession nowadays. Now, this maintenance electrician The pay range is $20 an hour all the way up to $27 an hour, depending upon your experience and how many or what your skill set is. And that's just the hourly rate that you would be receiving, not to mention the full benefits and vacation time and et cetera, sick time, things of that nature. So that's a good job right there if there are any electricians out there that are seeking employment elsewhere. We're also and always looking for transit drivers.
Oh.
You have to have a CDL in most cases. Not all of our buses now require you to have a CDL, but because we don't know which bus is going to be available
yes.
or which one is you're going to get, so we're still looking for CDL bus drivers. These are commercial driver's license with a passenger endorsement. These are $10 an hour to $13 an hour job with full benefits. There are some situations where if you only want to work part-time as a bus driver, we might be able to work with you on that as well. We have some of our bus drivers that are also school bus drivers. So they don't work for us full-time. They're on a part-time basis during the week, and then they're more full-time in the summer. They get more hours in the summer because obviously school is out.
Right.
So Marion area transit bus drivers is another position that we're looking for. And both of these positions you can find online, and you can also go to the third floor of City Hall and ask for the Human Resources Director there, Amy O'Connor, and she can get you all filled out, and we'll go from there. But another thing that we're looking for, and I know it's only mid-February, but in mid-March, we are going to start accepting applications for seasonal part-time work in the Parks Department and also seasonal work at the Aquatic Center. We need lifeguards and the support staff at the Aquatic Center. And I say that because there are a lot of teenagers and college students that will apply for those kinds of jobs. So I know the YMCA is going to be having lifeguard classes. They're going to do a couple of them. So keep your eyes and ears open or call out the YMCA and find out what you need to do to become a licensed lifeguard, because the lifeguards positions at the Aquatic Center, they generally pay a little bit more money than if you work at the front gate or if you're an attendant on the slides or you work in the concession stand. I'll have more details for you next month about what the hourly rates are for some of those positions and more details about the seasonal park workers and the aquatics employees that we're looking for.
Time to plan ahead.
Absolutely, it's time to plan.
So I know this may seem like a strange question, but tall weeds and grass, people who don't maintain their property, and the city has to step in and do that and all that. This is so you're planning now for spring. Any of that thing that you have to plan ahead for?
Well, a lot of what we're doing right now is really planning for the spring, because the swimming season is going to be upon us. The tall weeds and grass are going to be upon us. So we're proactive right now when it comes to the city's weed and grass program. And if you remember, last year in 2018 was the first time that anybody can remember that the city administration actually ran that program. What we saw last year was a lot of self-compliance with proper notification. We also billed everybody that we had to mow the lawn, and we had people that actually paid those bills. So we really like the statistics of where we're heading with this program. So we have a seasonal person that does the weed and grass program. He came in a little bit early this year. He's not a full-time person, but just to get a jump start on the weed and grass, he went out and found 40 properties that were missed and non-reported last year. 40. So we sent out notifications to the 40 owners of those parcels to let them know that they're non-compliant with our weed and grass ordinance. Now, keep in mind, these aren't just necessarily 40 residential parcels. These could be commercial or a vacant lot or something of that nature. but we're already thinking about how to get started on the weed and grass program for next year, since we had such great success this year.
Very good, very good. One thing that we talk about from time to time is the county land bank, and I know that folks may not understand exactly what that is, but it's a vital organization we have in the county.
Look, I can't tell you how important the county land bank is, let alone the former city land bank, which we're kind of dialing down now once the county created one. No need to have two competing land banks, and that's why the city land bank is down to about 15 parcels. Once we sell those, we're just going to shelf it and shutter it for the time being, because there's no need to have it. But the county land bank has been doing a lot of good work lately. They're actually starting on a couple of gas stations, which we'll get to later on in the show here. But they're tearing down homes all over the county, not just in the city, although most of them happen to be in the city because there's a higher density of houses in the city with older neighborhoods. So I just want to see the county land bank make sure it continues on to have a reliable source of revenue, whether it's the DTAC money or whether it's the transfer tax money that goes on $4 on every $1,000 that is sold in Marion County. That's a way to continue to fund the county land bank. We got an $850,000 grant about 3 years ago. That is going to be gone by this year in 2019. We will have expended all of that in tearing down blighted and abandoned homes. So it's done good work. I want to make sure that I can do everything that I can to talk it up and make sure that we continue the good work that the county land bank has done. I am a board member on the county land bank. However, it's the two county commissioners that have a lot of the authority on that particular 5-member board, and that's the way the state legislature wrote the laws, giving the counties the authorities to have the county land banks.
So one might be wondering how this all works. So the county land bank, a county is either abandoned or has to be torn down, whatever. So then a crew comes in and dismantles it, tears it down, scrapes it clean, carries it away, and now you have a property there that with no buildings on it, and then that is put up on auction and that money is sold. Where does that money go?
Well, in the county land bank, the county has to hold title to the property before it can be demolished.
Okay.
And that wasn't necessarily the case in previous grants and how the city acquired its parcels that it has. But now the new county land bank, they have to own title to the parcel before they can demolish it. And then they contract out the demolition. Okay. It's a bidding process. Okay. And then the contractor comes in. He has salvage rights to anything on the property before demolition. He does scrape it. He does fill in the basement or the crawl space or whatever, and he grades it and seeds it. So that's part of the city code when a home is torn down in the city, and it's also a regulation in the county land bank that they do that as well. So the county land bank will hold a number of these parcels in its arsenal. And ultimately, when the grant runs out, they will have to dispose of, whether it's through an auction or an outright sale to an individual who might be interested in the county land bank parcels. Now, the city parcels, we do a public auction in the lobby of City Hall. We actually held one earlier this month in March, and we sold 4 parcels. That's gotten us down to the 15 that I just mentioned. One of them was a commercial parcel that was donated to the city just because nobody wanted it anymore. And it actually had some buildings on it. So there's a small commercial parcel on West Center Street that we sold for $14,000. When the city sells its parcels, that money goes into a fund to continue to tear down homes in an emergency situation when we have to. That has nothing to do with the county's land bank.
So the county land bank is not self-funded by the sale of the property. It's the grant money that funds the operation.
No, and the sale of the lots was never intended to fully fund a land bank. It was intended to be a supplement in revenue to a county land bank, or in our case, the city land bank.
Very good. Very good. You mentioned earlier gas stations, and that was coming up here in my thoughts here. Marion City residents know there were abandoned gas stations around, and obviously the question is, whatever happens to them, what does happen to them?
Well, that's what we're trying to find out right now, and that's why the city is trying to take a comprehensive inventory of abandoned gas stations within the city. I think for many years, if you've lived in Marion, we've driven by just about every street corner on every thoroughfare in the city that used to have a gas station on all four corners. But many of those old gas stations don't exist anymore. Some of them have been repurposed into other businesses. Some of them have been totally demolished and the tanks have been removed. But what we're finding out in some of the more recent gas stations that have closed, say in the past decade or two, that there are still a nuisance in our community. So that's why we're taking the inventory, because we know that there is grant money out there that the state has, that if we take a proper inventory, fill out the proper paperwork, do the proper legal notifications to the titled property holders of those former gas stations, which are all in LLCs, so there's a way we have to get around that. We can apply for some of that grant money to abate the nuisance of an abandoned gas station. And that's one of our goals here in the city, is first take the inventory and then find a way to reach out to the state for some of that grant money to abate that old gas station.
A lot of things we're talking about here are things that go on kind of like, quote unquote, in public, but are behind the scenes, and I'm glad we have an opportunity to talk about that. I know that our viewers sometimes have questions about that because they see me on the street and they ask me, so I'm grateful for the opportunity to address this. Continuing on, here we are in February now, and there's a large number of potholes, and I know we can't fix them permanent, but how do we address that nuisance?
Well, first of all, as I tell anybody who asks about potholes, the best thing that you can do is call the city garage. We have a pothole number. It's really the general number for the city garage. It's 740-382-1479. You're probably not going to talk to a real person when you call in, just because this time of year we're getting so many phone calls about potholes. So I would ask you to please leave a message and leave the best description, geographic location of a pothole. If it's on Delaware Avenue, the closest street address is 123 Delaware. Give us as much information as you can. We will go out and fill the pothole. The problem with filling potholes right now with the kind of materials that we have available to us, we know it's only a temporary fix. And if the weather doesn't cooperate, that temporary patch may not last 24 or 48 hours. If you drive down Delaware Avenue right now and you look at the sidewalk along the cemetery, all that black grit you see up there, that's former cold mix that we were trying to fill potholes with. In fact, we even called our vendor that we buy the cold mix off of, and we said, look, this stuff just isn't holding. You're not using the same kind of mix that you used to. So they were able to work together to get a better mix, a better concentration of certain materials to hold a little bit longer. So we'll come back when it warms up, when the asphalt plants start producing what we call hot mix, which is really what you need. It's a more permanent patch to a pothole. So we're going to have to come back in the late spring, because the asphalt plants really don't fire up until about late April, early to mid-May.
Yes.
And that's really their choice of when they fire up, not our choice. And we'll refill those potholes that didn't hold over the winter months. I wish we had a different kind of material to use. If there's some inventor out there watching us on TV right now, come up with a winter material to fill potholes. You'll make millions on it. But call the number, leave a message. You don't have to leave your name if you don't want to. We're filling potholes all the time in the winter. As I've said, we got a second shift crew and a third shift crew. That's when we're going to fill most of the potholes, is when you're not out on the streets and there's less traffic out there. That's when we like to do it. It's a safe time to do it, but we'll fill potholes all winter long and into the spring.
Wow. So street work then leads into a question that in the summertime, in the late spring and early summer, street paving takes place. So let's say I live on Smith Street, and Smith Street is in terrible need of repair. So is there some, I'm assuming there's a record of when the last work was done on Smith Street, and how bad is it in priority to Jones Street, let's say, and can you tell us how the city goes about planning on which streets to do when?
Yes, and I think we've touched on this before, but it's always helpful because, again, this is the time of year in the winter months that we're planning for our street resurfacing program later on this year. We estimate for 2019 that we're going to have anywhere between $1.3 million to $1.5 million to resurface streets. Okay. And again, that is a much higher number than we normally have. We're normally down around $750,000 to $1 million. So we've got some additional revenues out there that we're able to tap into specifically and to only be used in the street construction, maintenance, and repair. That's our SCM&R fund. And so because it's such a large pot this year, we're already planning on what streets that we would like to pave. And yes, we look and see what is the condition of the street, how much traffic does it get, and when was it paved last. And some of our more traveled streets, it always seems like we're paving them every 10 years. That's probably because of the level of traffic that it gets on those streets. So we're in the process right now of determining what streets that we would like to pave, because we have to do an estimate on what it's going to cost to pave, call it 10 streets. And then that's how we put it out to bid to the contractors, so they bid on it, and we know that kind of have an estimate of what that cost is going to be. And again, that regular street resurfacing program doesn't usually take place till late August or sometime in September of this year. But also this year, the Ohio Department of Transportation is going to pave all of Bell Fountain Avenue out to the corporate limits going, it's kind of southwest bound, if you will. From
Prospect Street on?
Yeah, from Prospect Street heading southwest. So all of Bell Fountain Avenue will get done. That is a program between the city and the state. The state pays for 80%, the city pays for 20%, but on top of that 20%, we have to do all the base repairs on there. We got to make sure there are a good solid base underneath our streets. Some of our streets have gotten so old that the bases underneath don't hold for very long, and that's why the asphalt doesn't hold up. Now, that Bell Fountain Avenue paving project is not going to start until after July 1. And the reason for that is this year is a fiscal budget year for the state of Ohio. So they won't do any of their projects until their fiscal year starts, which is July 1 of this year.
Yes.
So those are some of the paving projects that we're looking at right now for 2019.
So for the viewer, then, what this actually means is that your street is known of and the record for when the work was done last, and people go around, city engineers, people go around and check the streets and to see which ones we have to address. So there's a lot of thought goes into that, and we would not have known that had we not had this conversation. So I thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It's always a treat to go through these things and find out. I often find out things that I didn't know, and I'm sure the viewers probably feel the same way. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
And looking forward to next month. And folks, thank you very much for joining in here with us and participating by listening. I thank you again for joining with us to this edition of Public Affairs. Again, I am your host. My name is John Peterson.